everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Celtics Talk Podcast here on the NBC Sports Boston Podcast Network. And well, it's a little bit of an emergency pod because John Tomase, the Boston Celtics announced today that Danilo Gallinari, after further examination, has a torn ACL. I think the best case scenario is you're thinking 9 months out, which, if I do like quick math, is June and probably the NBA Finals. So you're looking at a season-ending injury, most likely than not. Let's start 10,000-foot view. How are you feeling about this news?
Yeah, so it's funny when you first hear that he has an MCL and he's going to miss, 3 to 6 months or whatever it was going to be. You're like, okay, as long as he's back sometime late in the season and you can integrate him back in the lineup and he can give you what you need. The beauty of where the Celtics are now is a guy like Gallinari, you're just do it in the playoffs. That's what you were hoping for. Now that is gone. So let me just back up. So real quick, in that first scenario, I was okay with that, but I also wasn't expecting a ton out of Gallinari.
Right.
Like 34-year-old guy has already blown out an ACL, the same ACL as it turns out. And so, you're talking 8th, 9th man off the bench. Mm-hmm. Yes, that role was a definite problem in the finals. And so, okay, this is a guy who can fill that. But, I didn't think Gallinari, I'm not as excited about him. Brogdon is the guy that really mattered, I think, to Celtics fans. Now that he's gone, however, you say, well, that was half of your inspiring offseason. Yeah. And so that is somewhat of a big deal because you are still looking for someone who can make a shot, make a shot off the bench. That's what he does. That's what he's done his whole career. So in that sense, it is a loss.
And then maybe coming right off the news that the Cleveland Cavaliers trade for Donovan Mitchell, it's just like maybe accentuates it a little bit. And so it's certainly, to me, same deal. Like when they were saying that Danilo Gallinari was deciding between the Celtics and the Bulls, I was like, it's not a big deal if you lose that tug of war.
Sure.
You're talking about 8th, 9th guy. Like if you think Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon are your 6, 7, and Grant Williams is your 8, like it's not a huge deal if Danilo Gallinari isn't out there. But I do think there's a value in veterans and scorers, and we saw certainly in the finals they needed a little bit. And so when word comes down that he's not going to be out there, I do the same thing. I say, tough. When we just saw ESPN ran a survey and, half the people say the Celtics had the best offseason. Now, much of that is Malcolm Brogdon, and yet undeniably losing out on Gallinari and just having another body to spell your bigs is big. And that's where I think when I look at the Celtics roster loaded at the guard position, like Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown are essentially your starting backcourt. And then you're going to bring Malcolm Brogdon and Derek White off the bench. And then there's still Peyton Pritchard. And there's still like a lot of depth there. But you look at the front court, and Malcolm Brogdon was supposed to bring down minutes for not only Robert Williams and Al Horford, but Jason, Jaylen, and anybody else who was playing up at that point. So, what happens?
Yeah.
Do you just lean heavier on those guys? Or do you start searching for somebody to help out?
Yeah, the first thing I do, honestly, is we just assume that guys are set, that what we see is what we get. And if we've learned anything from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, it's that players can improve, especially players at that age. So I'm not ready to write off Grant Williams as the guy we saw in the finals, the guy we saw in Game 7 against the Bucks was pretty good.
Really good.
And so the strides, the growth that he made last year, what's to say he can't continue to improve? Like, he's an intriguing player to me. The finals sort of exposed him as like, okay, you're not Draymond yet. Right. You want to be Draymond. You're probably never going to get there because we're talking about a multiple-time All-Star, but you can be a facsimile of that. Sure. And you can be better. And so in the sense of how does this affect where Grant Williams fits in the rotation, I actually think it could be, I don't want to say blessing because Gallinari's out for the year, but just, cold hard facts, I think it could benefit the team to have Grant Williams continue to develop. We know what he is defensively. There are some things he can do on the post. We know, how he shoots and all of that, corner office. So I'm not willing to write off Grant Williams as, he's the guy we saw in the finals and they need an upgrade there.
And that's why I think you'll initially see the Celtics won't rush to make a move. I think they'll go into training camp and they'll say, well, how do we look? Does Sam Hauser, who was very good in his sort of two-way deal last year and then elevated to the parent roster, he can shoot the lights out of the ball. Has
literally, like he hits the lights.
It literally hits the light. And it's as nice of a shot as the Celtics have on their roster. Can he do something more than make shots? So, we didn't really see it in Summer League. I need to see that he can defend and maybe just not be a liability out there and do something else offensively because you can't just shoot. there's a thin margin there. And so, okay, can you lean on Grant even heavier? And Grant was going to be pressed a little bit for minutes, but if he had motivation before, he's got super motivation now to come out here and really assert himself and say, oh, I'm extension eligible. Here's why you should be extending me, all those things, especially in the first month of training camp. But yeah, like I just worry because it feels like a little bit of an arms race in the Eastern Conference. And the Celtics decided last year to just ride it out with what they've got. They said, we're going to sign for our final spots, Matt Ryan and Luke Cornett, who will be back, and all these kind of like guys that didn't have a ton of experience. And it's not a big deal, but even in the Nets series, when they were able to trot out Blake Griffin, I said, at least here's a guy who has been through it. And it didn't matter. It didn't tilt that series. He was a defensive sieve.
Yeah.
And like, maybe it doesn't matter, but part of me does say, like, do you need to go get a veteran that can weather that storm? And we'll get into names in a second. But like, do you need, like, how much value do you put on being 10 deep versus 12 deep?
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing that killed them last year. Second unit scoring was an issue all year. And it just became a fact of life for them that Tatum or Brown needed to be out with the second unit. And it often turned into that one guy and then four other people who kind of were there, but they weren't really doing much, and that was where they leaned on Brown a lot. And so somebody like Gallinari, you're saying, okay, that takes that secondary load off of one of those guys, because we saw it in the finals last year. I mean, Brown, to his credit, stayed strong right through the end, but Tatum wore down, and
100%.
He played a lot of basketball. We understand all that. And so that's where I think the Gallinari thing is going to be felt the most, where, and this is why I do think, no disrespect to Sam Hauser, that they probably do need to bring in another veteran guy, because you want to see that second unit expanded just a little bit, so you don't have to lean on your top two guys.
And I do think like Brogdon can play a multiple of positions. So like I can see a lineup where it's Smart, Brogdon, and whether it's like Derek White or Jaylen Brown, and Tatum goes up and plays the 5, and we're like, oh my God, they're super small. But they won't be that small. They'll be bigger than they were in small ball lineups last year.
Yeah, no Peyton Pritchard.
Right. Well, and I think Peyton has to take a next step too, and he should be motivated with the fact that their rotation is crunching a bit too. But
maybe he'll grow.
I don't think that's going to
Probably not going to happen.
Probably not going to happen. But let's throw some names out there. When I first heard, the Celtics might be interested in Carmelo Anthony, I was like, it's probably going to cost too much on the cap. It's probably not the right situation. Like, what happens when Danilo Gallinari comes back? And like, where's the minutes for Carmelo Anthony, who, by the way, you'd have to carry through the entire season to get the discounts necessary. But now that Danilo Gallinari is out for the year, there's minutes to be filled. Whether it is Carmelo Anthony, whether it is LaMarcus Aldridge, how do you feel about adding another veteran presence?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on Carmelo, I guess, because he's the guy that everyone's most interested in. Like, LaMarcus Aldridge doesn't really do much for me, because you're talking about somebody big and kind of plodding.
Lumbering,
yeah, and that, to me, I mean, that, you see Robert Williams, like, checking shooters at the three-point line and then blocking shots at the rim. I'm not sure that is LaMarcus Aldridge's game at this point in his career. So Carmelo, I guess I would turn it back to you. This is what I would want to know about Carmelo. So we're talking about somebody 19 years in the NBA, 75th anniversary team, multiple-time All-Star, scoring champ, all of that, MVP once, right? Yep. And we know what he is. 19 years, 2 times he's made it out of the first round of the playoffs. So that, to me, the NBA is a league where if you have the best player on the floor, you have a pretty good chance of winning the series. I got to think that he was the best player on the floor a lot of years that they were losing in the first round to Minnesota or whoever. Maybe KG was better, so maybe not. But I wonder, what kind of influence would he be in the locker room, A, and B, is he at a point in his career where he's, able to say, oh, this is what I've done wrong, and this is what you can learn? Or is he just who he is, which is a guy who's going to come in and shoot a lot and never pass and is very one-dimensional, and that's it?
I think this conversation starts with Jaylen and Jason, right? Like, what do they want? Do they want another body that they can lean on and who has been through it and maybe hasn't won, but is at a stage of their career where they embrace that? And if it starts with them and they just think that the veteran presence can help, and we heard during the Joe Johnson experience that they very much liked having that veteran presence, a guy who's been through it, and just hearing about it, but it wasn't, at that point, it wasn't worth it for them to carry him through the year, right? Like, because they weren't very good. And maybe if it had been different, if their surges started earlier in January, maybe you could carry him through. So that's where it has to start. It has to be like, yes, we're on board with this. And then you have to go and you have to talk to Carmelo Anthony. You have to say, are you cool with the idea that you might only play 15 minutes? And if he's like, yeah, like much like Malcolm Brogdon, I'm at a stage in my career where the only thing that matters is winning. And I tried to go to LA and do it, and that was miserable. And I've been to Portland and all these other places. All that matters to me is being part of a winning team, and I will do whatever it takes to be a good influence. Then you think about it, because he does replicate a lot of what Danilo does in terms of just being a score first guy off the bench who can play power forward, who is not very good defensively. And that will limit the amount of minutes he can play. I don't want it to bite into Grant Williams' time if Grant Williams is playing to his potential. And I don't want it to bite into even Sam Hauser. But if you just feel like if the East is going to be good enough where you just need bodies who have been through it, then I give it consideration. Much like you. So LaMarcus Aldridge has a history with Ime Udoka.
Yep.
Was there in San Antonio, part of the recruiting pitch to bring him there. But he's had his whole like the heart thing. And, so I do worry that you're bringing in guys that you just cannot consistently lean on, who are not ready to be part of. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe all he wants to play is 10, 15 minutes and hit a couple mid-range jumpers. But I would like to give the younger guys a chance to figure it out before you get to that. And I don't know if you have that opportunity, because maybe Carmelo's got other opportunities out there and you just got to strike. But I'm with you. Just like, how are you feeling about this team coming in? And is Brad Stevens panicked enough to make that move?
Yeah. And it certainly seems like the answer to that is no,
right.
Because you mentioned it earlier. We saw how they approached the beginning of the season when things seemed to be going off the rails and there was a lot of patience there. And then, in fact, they added Derek White and we're like, wait, what's going on? They're actually going for it. So I think patience is not going to be an issue there. I guess the one thing I would push back on you a little bit, like Sam Hauser, is that?
No, I know.
So,
we got to see it.
Yeah.
And Sam Hauser didn't do anything in Summer League that suggested to me that he definitively deserves minutes. So, but like, that's what training camp is for. And maybe the first 2 preseason games, you're like, okay, how does this rotation look? How is this going to work? And if you're just, we're just one piece, one guy short. We need another big, because even Luke Cornett as the third big just isn't enough. Maybe get to the point where you start thinking about those things.
Yeah, I suppose. So, and then, it's like, is Rudy Gay an option or some of these other guys? But I guess, Carmelo is really the name with the most appeal, just in terms
but even Rudy Gay had time with the Spurs and has an Ime Udoka connection. And I think Rudy Gay is probably 2-3 years ago was the perfect, what they were looking for in that spot. I do think there's a benefit to having veterans, and especially when you're just trying to beef up and be in there. I keep saying it, and it's probably a horrible comparison, but like the Nets being able to try out Blake Griffin, like at least you could try to lean on him. The Celtics couldn't consistently lean on Matt Ryan and like the end of the bench guys, Malik Fitz. Like they were great presence, but they couldn't throw them into a playoff series. At least Blake Griffin, you can throw out there and be like, okay, he gets scored on 100 times in a row, but at least it could be something offensively. So I wonder if there's a benefit for that. Maybe we'll cross that bridge further down the road. A couple more things before, because like I know this is the big topic now that Danilo's out, but so the Cavs make the trade for Donovan Mitchell. East is loaded. How are you feeling about the Celtics' place in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, it just got a little more precarious. I actually felt pretty good about it before this trade, because you're like, you know what? I think the Celtics match up well with Milwaukee, and I'm sick of hearing, well, if Chris Middleton had been there, then you would have lost. And it's like, okay, well, if the Bucks get Chris Middleton, then the Celtics get a healthy Robert Williams. Like that, yeah, I think you have to say it that way. And then I still like the Celtics' chances. Miami, I feel like, is an aging team, kind of. You saw some cracks there in terms of Tyler Hero. Like, is he a long-term piece? All that stuff. So they don't scare me a ton. Cleveland was a good up-and-coming team. I loved their backcourt before, and Colin
I love their front court.
Yeah. So, but like Darius Garland and Sexton, I liked that backcourt.
Sexland.
Yes. And so, but Jarrett Allen, that's like, that is a legit team, but you still sort of look at them and say, are they suddenly going to be the class of the East? We're still talking about a team that was in the play-in part of the playoffs. So, But Donovan Mitchell, that's a guy the Celtics have never matched up well with.
Right.
He has torched them consistently, so that's a little scary.
My thing with them was they didn't have an offensive sort of centerpiece that they could lean on and just carry them for stretches, which every good team sort of needs. Like, you need to be able to throw the ball at Jason Tatum and be like, go get us a bucket. Donovan Mitchell can do that for stretches of this, and he's going to be just more consistent. Colin Sexton was, and their whole backcourt, and whatever the pieces are around him. But like starting with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and having that front court, and then whatever it is, Kevin Love's still there. Like, you're going to have pieces that can help you. And so, like, I think they're in the mix. And this is what I keep going back to. Celtics last year sort of made this surge, and we're all like, oh, wow, here from the Celtics. And for the Cavs, it was just the opposite. It was like they were up in the top 4 the whole year and then kind of faded. Like, the Celtics can have that target on them throughout the whole year. And are they ready for that? Are they ready to be the hunted instead of the hunting?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question that this season is going to answer for us. And to go back to something you said earlier about, they liked Joe Johnson and maybe Carmelo can be that veteran guy. Like, at what point are Brown and Tatum the veteran guys?
Yeah,
I mean, true. This is Tatum's 6th year we're going into, right?
And Al Horford is 37 years old.
And Al Horford is exactly what you're talking about. So I would like to think a team that has been to the finals, a team that has seen their 2 best players really run the gamut throughout the whole playoffs in terms of being dominating, in terms of turning the ball over, being challenged, all of that stuff. I'd like to think that at some point we can just call them the veterans, So I don't know.
All right. Well, training camp is only 3.5 weeks away.
Get some rest, Chris Forsberg.
Gonna get in as many rounds of golf as I can before these Celtics start back up, which is just incredibly quick. But that is the way it goes when your team is in the mix and in the NBA Finals, and I will live with that because it's better than being done in
my Red Sox, for instance.
We're not taking it there. Although the Woo Sox have been great. I love my hometown is buzzing about all the people that have been up there. So I need everybody to go like, subscribe, check us out on the YouTube page. We'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk Podcast.